Syracuse has a hole at running back after LeQuint Allen declared early for the NFL draft. Here's how the Orange should fill that void.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome in Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, we are talking about Syracuse football's running backs for the 2025 college football season. Later on in the podcast, we will address how Syracuse can replace LeQuint Allen's production from a year ago. We're also going to talk about the top two running backs for Syracuse this upcoming season. Yasin Willis, we'll begin with him, and also Will Nixon. All that and more here on today's edition of Locked On Syracuse. So I am well aware of what is going on with Syracuse football recruiting. Right? Last night, they flipped a three-star offensive tackle, Roseby Labintis from Penn State. My plan is that we are going to talk about him as well as Syracuse football recruiting tomorrow on Poll Friday, which is where you think Syracuse football's recruiting class will end up when all is said and done in 2026, okay? So let's talk about the running backs for today's show and begin the podcast talking about Yasin Willis. Because look, they have big shoes to fill with LeQuint Allen deciding to declare early for the NFL draft earlier this offseason. Good for him. He ends up getting picked in the draft in the 7th round by the Jacksonville Jaguars. And like LeQuint replaced Sean Tucker, Syracuse is going to need someone to replace LeQuint. And that someone, if you're looking for a one-for-one, could be Yasin Willis, a 6'1", 225-pound sophomore. He was a 2024 Rivals 4-star recruit. In fact, he was nearly a top 200 player in the country over on that major recruiting site. Other major recruiting sites has had him as a high-end 3-star. So overall, Yasin Willis was a really solid running back recruit that Syracuse got a year ago. And he was a backup last season to LeQuint Allen. And we did see some flashes and some glimpses of the future at running back for Syracuse. And I'm happy that Yasin Willis decided to stick around and not leave in the transfer portal this offseason. Not that I thought that he would, but you never know in this day and age. It's nice that he came as a true freshman, played a little bit, decided to stick with the same program, and now he's going to have an even bigger opportunity to impress as a true sophomore. Last year, 11 games played, 36 carries for 130 yards and 1 touchdown. He also caught 8 passes for 26 yards, and he was also a big contributor on special teams. He had 10 kickoff returns a year ago for 212 yards. That's an average of over 21 yards per kickoff return, which was 10th in the ACC. Here's the question, though, with a guy like Yasin Willis, and feel free to comment along here in the comments section below. Do you view Yasin Willis as a future workhorse back for Syracuse football, or do you think he's someone who might be best served in a committee? And I want to be clear, someone who is a committee running back, it's not that the guy is bad or anything like that, but it's just, where do you think he's at in this stage of his development right now? I guess we're going to find out in 2025, but the way I view him for now is I don't think he's going to have the same impact like we saw LeQuint Allen when he took over as the lead back, when Sean Tucker left, and when Sean Tucker took over as the lead back. Actually, he did it as a true freshman. Look, Yasin Willis, he's big, he's fast, and I view him as a thumper. And I think that's a really good thing. This is someone who, if you put on the field in short yardage situations, 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, 4th and 1, 4th and 2. I trust that a guy like Yasin Willis can barrel his way forward and get that first down. So even if Syracuse's offensive line breaks down, this is someone who I view can also break those tackles, fall forward, and get those extra yard or two, right? He also did kind of show an ability to catch passes. I was pleasantly surprised, even though it doesn't necessarily reflect on the stat sheet. But again, that's mostly because a guy like LeQuint Allen was on the field the majority of the time a year ago. So we didn't really get to see Yasin Willis that much. I would like Yasin Willis to improve on his yards per carry because last season, and I think this is part of the reason why I don't know if he is a true 3-down workhorse running back just yet. Last year, his yards per carry was only 3.6. It's not very good. Ideally, for running backs, you want them to be at least 4 yards per carry. And in college football, you want it to be even higher than that. You want it to probably be around 4.5 yards per carry, which is where LeQuint Allen was a season ago. But overall, with Yasin Willis, I do like his upside because I think he can develop into a really, really strong running back. And he already has the size to even play in the National Football League. But I think he still needs a little bit more seasoning. He's going to get a bigger role this upcoming season. He does project on the depth chart to be the RB1 for what it's worth. There's a reason why I'm talking about him first. But I'm not sure just yet if he is truly an RB1 or if he's really an RB1A and you need an RB1B behind him. But comment in the comments section below your thoughts on Yasin Willis taking over potentially as the lead running back for Syracuse football. Now, coming up, we'll talk about the player who projects to be behind Yasin Willis on the depth chart, but who knows? I think he could have a Trevor Pena-like impact in 2025. Of course, I'm talking about Will Nixon, so stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following along the action. Why not make it a little bit more thrilling, right? Maybe you go to the ballpark with a few friends, and going to a baseball game is really fun, particularly in the beginning. Those first 3 innings, you're all excited. But then you get into the middle innings, and it can sometimes get a little bit boring, right? And then there's all these pitching changes. So at that point, it might be the perfect time to maybe make a same game parlay or live bet, if you will, over on FanDuel. And with FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. Or better yet, you can get sunburned at the beach, but hey, you can go to FanDuel at the same time. New to FanDuel? Well, it's the perfect time to sign up because new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and let's get back to this podcast talking about the Syracuse football running backs for the 2025 college football season. We began the podcast talking about how Yasin Willis, a true sophomore back, projects to be the starter, the one-for-one replacement potentially of LeQuint Allen, maybe, but to me, as of right now, and I could be proven wrong, of course, I view him maybe as more of a committee type back, someone who can potentially grow into a workhorse running back by year 3, or who knows, maybe by midway through 2025. So with that being said, it's important to have someone good behind your RB1, right? Either way, you want a good backup running back because that backup running back, I don't care who you got back there. You could have Barry Sanders back there, and guess what? You're still going to need a backup running back to take some carries and just take some downs. Running backs can't be on the field 100% of the time over the course of an entire season, right? So who is behind Yasin Willis? Well, that is Will Nixon. And I think he is the perfect complement to a guy like Yasin Willis. 5'11", 200 pounds, redshirt senior. So he's smaller and he's also more experienced than Yasin Willis. But I'll get to the smaller part in just a second. I don't say that necessarily as a bad thing. Will Nixon is the son of Syracuse offensive coordinator Jeff Nixon, and he transferred to Syracuse from Washington ahead of the 2024 season. And we didn't really get to see much of Will Nixon a year ago. And it's unfortunate because I think he was playing quite well. And I'll get to it in just a second. But played in 3 games, 19 carries, 76 yards, so exactly 4 yards per carry. Also had 4 catches for 44 yards. The reason why Will Nixon only played 3 games, therefore preserving his red shirt, he was able to take a medical red shirt and come back for this season. He broke his left foot in the Holy Cross game, and he got surgery on it as well. So we do have to keep that in mind with a guy like Will Nixon. Is he going to be healthy? Is he going to be ready to go up to speed for week 1 against Tennessee? I think so, based on what I'm reading online, but you never know. It's something that we definitely have to monitor with a guy like Will Nixon coming off of a foot injury. But assuming that he's healthy, again, he's the perfect complement to Yasin Willis. For those that don't know, Will Nixon started his collegiate career as a wide receiver at Nebraska. If you're good enough to be recruited by a Big Ten program like Nebraska to play wide receiver, that means you can catch the football. Will Nixon is a better pass-catching running back than a guy like Yasin Willis. And again, Yasin Willis, he did flash at times during the season that he could catch passes, but Will Nixon is probably better served for that role. I view it as as Yasin Willis is kind of the thunder. He's your thumper. He's your short yardage back. He's someone who can definitely play first, second down, and third and short. But then first, second, third, and long, you're probably looking at a guy like Will Nixon. And here's a take for you all. And this is how I tease this segment. So here we go. Get ready for it. Last year, Syracuse football had a returning player on its roster that seemingly came out of nowhere. And this player just so happened to also be coming off an injury. That player was Trevor Pena. I did not see Trevor Pena having the year that he ended up having. I know it sucks that he left the program, especially in the manner that he did and what happened online following it. But if we're going back to last season and we're talking about the positives, Trevor Pena was a huge surprise, a huge breakout star. I don't know if really anyone really saw this coming, except for maybe Trevor Pena and his coaching staff, and maybe I guess the rest of the football team for that matter, but I certainly didn't. He ended up becoming second team All ACC. So why am I talking about Trevor Pena so much? Well, if you look up and down the roster for Syracuse football, who is that veteran player that you think could be a surprise? Someone who maybe has more to give than what they have shown so far, because maybe the opportunity hasn't quite been there for them, or maybe they've been dealing with injuries. I think it's Will Nixon. Will Nixon, it's a short sample in his career. It's not big, but he averages 5 yards per carry. He was a second string running back for a team that played in the national title 2 years ago, Washington. They lost to Michigan. So am I projecting that Will Nixon is going to be this year's Trevor Pena? Not necessarily, because I think it's nearly impossible to make that type of prediction. But when I look up and down the roster, who could have that type of impact? Why not Will Nixon? Because I think he's got more to give than maybe what his stats say, because he hasn't really quite had the opportunities. And unfortunately, he's dealt with injuries. Comment your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you think that Will Nixon could be the surprise veteran breakout star for Syracuse football in 2025? Comment in the comment section below. Now, behind Will Nixon, we still got to talk about a couple more running backs here on this podcast before we get to the third segment, where we discuss overall just how they can really replace a guy like LeQuint Allen and his numbers from a year ago, what are they going to do here, right? I think there are two clear running backs behind that are the 3 and the 4. First, you got Jaden Hart, and then you got Malachi James. They are both true sophomores. We can start with Jaden Hart. Last year, he got 3 carries. He caught 2 passes as well. I bet he gets more than that as a running back 3 this upcoming season. Last year, he was an RB3, especially when Will Nixon went down, but you had LeQuint Allen on the field. He had most of the carries, most of the catches, but I think that Jaden Hart will see the field more in year 2 compared to year 1. And then you got Malachi James, a track and field star. He did not receive a single carry a season ago. I bet that changes in 2025, even if it's not much, but he was mainly used on special teams. Malachi James had 8 kickoff returns a season ago for over 150 yards. It equates to about 19 yards per kickoff return. I would like to see Malachi James improve on that because 19 yards per kickoff return isn't exactly ideal. I mean, we go back to the first segment talking about Yasin Willis and his kickoff return ability. His yards per kickoff return was 2 yards higher than Malachi James, and Malachi James is probably the fastest player on Syracuse football's roster. So overall, those are the top 2 backs and the bottom 2 backs, in my opinion. I think at the top, you got a 1A and 1B type situation with Yasin Willis and Will Nixon. And behind them, you got a pair of true sophomore running backs. You got Jaden Hart and Malachi James. And overall, what are your thoughts on Syracuse football's running backs for this upcoming season? I love to hear from you in the comments section below, because coming up, we're going to discuss how Syracuse can possibly replace the production of LeQuint Allen. And is it possible that Syracuse is better with its rushing attack in 2025? Stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and we still got plenty more to talk about here on today's show, discussing Syracuse football's running backs for the 2025 college football season. We're about to discuss how Syracuse can replace LeQuint Allen and how they could potentially be better as a team with their rushing attack in 2025, despite the fact that LeQuint Allen is not with Syracuse. He is in the National Football League. But before we do so, since you've already made it this far in the podcast, first of all, thank you so much. It truly means a ton. All your support is tremendous. If you can just do me a favor, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, because it helps Locked On Syracuse grow to reach all Syracuse Orange fans. And of course, thank you to all those who continue to like and subscribe to Locked On Syracuse each and every day. You all are truly the best. So, I know it might be hard to believe, but Syracuse football and their rushing attack, it could be better in 2025 compared to what it was in 2024. And this is not a knock on LeQuint Allen. It's just looking at the numbers. Now, I've alluded to this throughout the podcast that I do not believe Syracuse football has a 1-for-1 replacement for LeQuint Allen. I think you could name Yasin Willis the RB1, but I don't necessarily think he is going to be as good or as versatile as a guy like LeQuint, because a guy like LeQuint, for context, nearly 300 touches a year ago, over 1,500 scrimmage yards, and he had 20 combined touchdowns. There's no running back on Syracuse's roster right now that's going to match that production in 2025. And if there's a running back that matches that production in 2025 on Syracuse's roster, I will be pleasantly surprised. I will be thrilled if that happens. I want to be clear. That would be outstanding. But here's the kicker. Syracuse a year ago averaged less than 100 yards per game rushing wise as a team. That was third worst in the ACC. And they also had a very low yards per carry as a team. I think it was 3.2 yards per carry to be exact. And I think it could be a little bit misleading because, number one, they primarily passed the ball a season ago with Kyle McCord throwing the ball nearly 50 times per game. And also quarterback sacks in college. I don't know why, and they still haven't fixed it, and I don't know when they're going to fix it, but quarterback sacks count against rushing yards for some odd reason. It doesn't do that in the NFL, and the NFL has that right. College, you need to get your act together with that. Sacks should not count against a team's rushing yards. But that's neither here nor there. But even still, right, every team has that happen to them, but other teams have more maybe mobile quarterbacks to be able to make up the difference in how much they're losing in sack yardage. Whereas with Kyle McCord, that wasn't necessarily the case. But the point being is that even when you look at Syracuse's running back room, I could easily see Syracuse topping what they did a year ago rushing wise, because it's not like they were very good as a team necessarily. LeQuint Allen was really good as an individual, but as a team, it's not like they ran the ball that much, and even for many yards per carry. You look at their running back by committee, that's probably how they are going to do this. Yasin Willis and Will Nixon as the primary running backs. I think both are very capable of playing on both first and second down. And when you get to third down, it really just depends on the situation. If it's third and short, you're probably going to want to go with a guy like Yasin Willis because he's 6'1", 225 pounds, and he can run through you. If it's third and 6, you might want to put out a guy like Will Nixon on the field because you know he can catch passes at a better rate, and he also is better at making people miss than a guy like Yasin Willis. As far as moving laterally and being shifty, Yasin Willis will make you miss by simply just, I guess, running through you, right? But overall, I think when you look at this running back by committee, I do think that Syracuse as a team could be better rushing-wise than they were last season. And I also think that there's plenty of opportunity for someone to emerge at the running back spot as the primary lead back. Just because it might start as a committee doesn't mean that that's how it's going to finish. We could be talking about, it could be as soon as week 2. If Yasin Willis in week 1 against Tennessee carries the ball for 18 times for over 100 yards and also catches 3 or 4 passes, we're probably going to come on this podcast and say Yasin Willis is the RB1 for the foreseeable future. That's how quickly it can change. But for now, I view it as an RB by committee. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below on this running back room in general and whether or not you think that Syracuse's running back room could be better, or at least their production could be better than it was a season ago. Comment in the comments section below. Now, as far as what is coming up on Locked On Syracuse here in the future, tomorrow, as I said at the very, very beginning of the podcast, we got Poll Friday. We will discuss Syracuse football recruiting. The question for this week was where you think Syracuse's recruiting class will end up now by signing day. We did this actually a few weeks ago. That was before Syracuse landed Calvin Russell. Now they have Calvin Russell. They also got that offensive tackle I mentioned earlier. They flipped him from Penn State. Where will it finish in 2026 come signing day? Currently, it's bordering on top 20 in the country. So that's what's coming up on Locked On Syracuse in the future. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. And for your second listen, you can check out the Locked On Portal Show with football recruiting expert Brian Smith. He's got the latest rumors and signings each and every day, and there's a lot of content about Calvin Russell on the Locked On Portal podcast. You might want to check it out when you're done watching or listening to this. And you can also be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape, whether it's NIL or looking at recruiting all around the country aside from Syracuse. You can find the Portal podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, thank you. Truly means a ton. If you can just do me a favor, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Helps the channel grow to reach all Syracuse Orange fans. And we'll be back tomorrow with Poll Friday talking about some Syracuse football recruiting. Take care, everyone.